Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get rolling here. We are now at Mark chapter 12, and there's a lot we got to talk about today. Um, let's see. So, yes, we'll try to get through Mark chapter 12 here. Ideally, if we're able to do one chapter a week, that might be a little ambitious of us, but I think that's probably a good pace for wrapping up Mark's gospel. I'm getting over a little bit of a chest cold. It's kind of nasty, but feeling much better now. Pastor Richard's probably like 2 days behind me, it seems. So, yeah, we know we share. It's been apparently been going around the church office. I told Aaron he might want to keep his distance from us uh, to be safe. No, I'm much improved now. A few days ago, yes, I would have, but excellent. But I got my water, so we're good there. But yeah, so Mark chapter 12, and kind of continuing our flow of now we're moving into this new segment of Mark's gospel we had last week, where Jesus was encountered by the leaders who've kind of come on the scene are now challenging his authority to do things like the cleansing of the temple and other stuff that Jesus has been doing and saying. So we're going to have more of that than this week. So, okay, let's open with prayer and then dive in. God of grace, we thank you on this Trinity Sunday. We remember your work for us, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We pray that you would bless us and guide us that we might see by the working of the Spirit your work for us in your word. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so we're now moving into this new chapter, like I said, where Jesus is now speaking not just to his disciples, but to the leaders of the people, so opposition. And so we're going to see, because again, in Mark's gospel, we've seen that there's conflict in Mark's gospel, conflict here that we're going to be seeing now against the establishment as these people are coming up against Jesus. So the parable of the tenants, what we're going to do is we're going to read through it once, and then we're going to come back to it again after I get a chance to kind of explain some concepts that are really important, kind of unpacking things. So before we do it, the first read through though, we're going to understand as we go through that what we're hearing about the parable that Jesus is describing. It's not that it was all just kind of this is the regular stuff that happens. Jesus' parables are kind of can oftentimes like take on some kind of what's exaggerated forms of life, right? So it's not just that life is like this, but kind of amplified is another way of saying it. So these amplified things happening. But what he's going to be talking about here is kind of in line with the agricultural practices of the time that we don't necessarily have an understanding of in our day-to-day life. We'll talk about what those were. That farmers, like we're going to be hearing about, that they are tenants, that they have rights, that the harvests or the years that are going to be happening as we hear this, those are going to be important to the story Jesus is telling. And then finally, that the coming of the last representative, the Son, is going to be important. So let's take a look and see what Jesus says here. So Mark 12, verse 1. Jesus began to speak to them, so to the disciples, to the leaders, in parables. A man planted a vineyard and put a fence around it and dug a pit for the winepress and built a tower and leased it to tenants and went into another country. When the season came, he sent a servant to the tenants to get from them some of the fruit of the vineyard. And they took him and beat him and sent him away empty-handed. Again, he sent to them another servant, and they struck him on the head and treated him shamefully. And he sent another, and him they killed. And so with many others, some they beat, some they killed. And he still had one other, a beloved son. Finally, he sent him to them, saying, "They will respect my son." But those tenants said to one another, "This is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours." And they took him and killed him and threw him out of the vineyard. What will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and destroy the tenants and give the vineyard to others. Have you not read this scripture? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This was the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. And they, the leaders, were seeking to arrest Jesus, but feared the people, for they perceived that he had told the parable against them. So they left him and went away. Okay, so first reading through, what is this parable about? What do you guys think? What's kind of the, if you've read this before, if you've heard these things, what's Jesus talking about in this parable of the wicked tenants? He's talking about himself, so Jesus is in there. Is Jesus the tenants? Is Jesus the vineyard? Jesus is the son. Okay, so there's a connection there. Ah, okay. So there's this thing with the prophets. Okay, what else? We'll see. We'll see. The tenets are the Pharisees, or because there's not just the Pharisees, right? And so we'll get to that. Okay, anything else? These are good things, right? Okay. All right. Now, so before we go through it a second time, here are some things to kind of understand about the agricultural practices of the time and kind of where things are at and, in the world. So you've got Jesus is using this image of the vineyard. This is a callback, right, to Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 5, where it talks about God establishing this vineyard. And here the focus in Isaiah, the focus is on the vineyard, where God builds the wall around the vineyard. He does all these great things, provides for it, gives it everything it needs, but then it produces wild grapes, right? Bad grapes. So the problem is with the vineyard there, right? But the focus, as Jesus takes it, turns a little bit here. So that you have this vineyard where there's a guy. So think about this as somebody who is a wealthy investor, entrepreneur, if you want to think of it that way, that he's going to put all the money in to give this everything it needs to succeed. So anybody been to like downtown Beloit in however many years, right? A lot of money's been put into downtown Beloit. So imagine that. So this vineyard it's a very nice vineyard. It's got the hedge around it so that it's got its defined boundaries. It keeps the trespassers out, small animals out. It also kind of keeps the vines from growing out and trespassing onto other territory. It's got the tower that's built in it. So the tower would probably be the place where the tenant farmers would live. So it could be like a family, it could be like a father-son operation or something like that. They live in the tower, but also lets you look out, oversee the vineyard, make sure there's nobody trespassing on it, or kind of see things from a ways away. So the father's making this investment. So it's a personal interest to him for it to succeed. And so he's getting that all set up. Then he brings in these tenants, these farmers, and tenant farmers. They had a lot of duties, a lot of responsibilities that they had to accomplish as part of this arrangement, because this would be a formal contract where the tenant farmers would work the land of the owner. So they would have to train the vines, they'd have to get them ready, they'd have to prune them. They also had to think about not just the vines, not just the vineyard, but they would probably also grow some other crops on the land too. So they'd have other things that while the vines were growing out, there would be some crops, fruits that would be born from the land to kind of help balance the investment while the vineyard was getting up to speed. Does that make sense so far? So there's a lot of stuff that these farmers are required to do. They have a lot of responsibilities. In the first 4 years with the vineyard being set up, the owners, so 4 years, right? In the first 4 years, the owner's share of the crop, so the one who's invested, the one who's kind of put in all the capital to make this enterprise a thing, he'd get 10% of the crops, of the fruits of the land. And then the 90% would be the tenant farmers. So they could use that to kind of help take care of themselves and make some money. After the 4 years, The owner gets 50%. So after things are kind of fully up and running, half goes to the owner, half goes to the tenant farmers. So that's kind of the way that these things would be laid out. And then all of this would be, there'd be a contract, there'd be agreement that'd be put down in writing. And the tenants would have a copy, and the owner would have a copy. So that's kind of how these things would be done. This agreement kind of in writing. And then the owner, if you think about it this way, they'd have big financial obligations in that those first years as things are getting up and running, kind of establishing everything there, because there's not so much fruit being produced or crops being produced. So they're not seeing a lot of profit, but the supplies that's needed for cultivating and all, they're footing the bill for all of that. So the tenants, they're paying in labor. They're doing the work. And then later, when the crops are coming in, the tenants are getting paid from the results of the fruit. So far, so good. So those are kind of things to understand. A couple other things to understand, that there would be that thing for the multiple years, the multiple harvests as things are happening. When you have a case where the owner is not present, like as we hear in this parable, like it goes off to a different country, Jesus says. He's not there, he's remote. The owner needs to have a representative, to send a representative for every one of the harvests to reiterate their claim to it. Because if they don't, then they're forfeiting. They're giving up on it. So they need to send somebody as a representative to do that. The farmer tenants, they could assert, in lack of proof to the contrary, that if the owner is not sending representatives, or if the owner is not giving the fruit. So think of it this way: whoever gets the fruit is the owner. Does that make sense? So the person that keeps the fruit, keeps the crops, they're the owner of that property, the owner of that vineyard, farm, what have you. And so, in the absence of proof, in the absence of the agent of the owner, then they're the ones that get to kind of go away with everything. So let's go back and take a look at the parable again and read through this. So Jesus speaking to the people, not just to his disciples, right, but to the leaders as well in a parable. A man planted a vineyard, put a fence around it, and dug a pit for the winepress and built a tower. So again, he's investing the capital. He's not doing this halfway. He's all in. Everything that it needs for success. He leases it to tenants, and then he goes to another country. Important. So the owner has gone away. When the season came, so the harvest, he sent a servant to the tenants to get from them some of the fruit of the vineyard. Why does the owner do it? Because this is what's in the contract, right? This is the understanding. He needs to send somebody as a representative to claim the agreed upon portion of the crop. So he goes, he does what he's supposed to do there, and the tenants, the farmer tenants, right? They take the servant and they beat him and they send him away empty-handed. And so this, in the sending too, the word that's being used in Mark here is kind of being sent like with a purpose, or sent, maybe think of it this way, sent with a message. So the servant is sent from the owner with a message, right? And then the servant, same servant, is sent away from the tenants with a message. And he said they beat him up, but they also, it's not just that he comes and then goes the same way. They leave him empty-handed. It's also, there's a sense there, not just that they didn't give him the 10% of the crops they were supposed to, but they might have also robbed him or taken from him stuff that he had. that he's going back with less than he came with, returning back to the owner, the master. Okay. 1 year. Again, so verse 4, again, he sent to them another servant. And they struck him on the head and treated him shamefully. So they send this guy back. Do they send him with any of the crops? No. And they've escalated. So they're shaming this second servant that's come. They've beat him, and so they're kind of again refuting him. And if you can imagine this, is they're kind of making their case. They're saying, well, this guy is like harassing us. He doesn't have ownership here. You get out. Okay. So we have that. That's the second year. Third year, another he sent, again, with a message, with a commission the owner is sending. And that one, they killed. And imagine, and along with many others, so he sent the others. So this third one, the master is sending not alone. There's what's a good word for these attendants? He's sending them with attendants, so that's not just this third guy going alone. There's a crew coming with him as kind of witnesses, and so the third. So some of those they beat, some of those they kill, and so there's been how many years? 3 years. Important thing, we didn't talk about this yet, but important thing about the property law too is after 3 years, whoever has had the property, whoever has been claiming the crops, they're the owner. Except if the owner is not in country or not local, they have to be given the opportunity to prove their claim. So then they get a bonus 4th year. So how many years have elapsed? 3 years. What happens if the owner doesn't show after the 4th year? He's forfeiting his claim that the tenants are the owners. They become the owners. So it can't just be anybody showing up to have that proof. It has to be the person that has the ownership themselves showing up. And so what people would do back then is, in order to do this, they would, see if this makes sense, they would hand over the title to their representative. So the representative could go, they're the owner. They've been entrusted with the ownership to prove the claim. So the representative is the empowered. They're the owner. The ownership's been given over to them to make the claim. And then, in theory, I guess they would return it back to the actual owner that they're serving. But this is important. Okay, so we've had 3 years. 3 times the owner has sent these servants to claim the crops. That has been rejected. So the 4th year, let's see what happens. So the owner, he had still one other, a beloved son. So the owner has a son. And so he sent him to them, saying, they will respect my son. So what is the owner sending his son with as well? The title. He's probably actually got the written agreement, because there were 2 copies of it, right? There's one that the tenants have. There's one that the owner has. So he'd be sending his son with the title. The son is the owner. He is going in the owner's stead. He is the owner. So verse 7, but the tenants, the farmer tenants, they said to one another, imagine they're up in the tower, maybe looking out. They see, this is the heir. Come on. Let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. And then taking him, they kill him. They throw him out of the vineyard, and they think things are great, right? Because they've probably destroyed their copy of the written contract. If the son had his, they've destroyed that. Is there any proof of the owner who's not there, of him having ownership? No, there isn't. And they probably, this is a kind of a side fact here, would the farmers, would they kill the son in the vineyard proper? No, because his blood would then go in the ground, which would then contaminate the grapes. So they probably kill him in the tower. Maybe as they're having having a dialogue or something like that. And then they imagine they're kind of throw his body off the tower out of the vineyard. So Jesus continues the parable. What will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and destroy the tenants and give the vineyard to others. Destroy, the word that's used there too, is not just like kill, but is like shame and kill. It's like ruin. He's going to come, and it is not going to be pretty. We talk about the grapes, right? The grapes of wrath, the dregs, are going to be poured out on these tenants, and then the vineyard is going to be given to others. All right, so let's pause on that for a second there. So the son is going to come. He's going to be killed, and then the kingdom is going to be given. Spoiler. The vineyard is going to be given over to others. All right, so let's go back and take a look at this. Right, let's keep reading. Sorry, Jesus keeps continuing. There's a little bit of a segue. Have you, those who are listening to me, not just disciples, but the leaders of the people, have you not read this scripture? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This was the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. And the cornerstone, think of it this way, not necessarily much of like a foundation cornerstone, but this word could also be used of a keystone in like an arch. So you know the keystone in an arch, what does it do? It holds it all together, right? If you take the keystone out, it falls apart. But the keystone is the thing that anchors it. So, all right, so Jesus is telling this parable, and many of the points that you said before we even read it, you got it, right? So that there's this thing, the parable is pointing to God's people. God's people are the vineyard. Who are the tenant farmers? The leaders of God's people, whether it's the chief priests, the kings, those who are entrusted with caring for the vineyard. The vineyard is God's people. It's the leaders are the tenant farmers. And across history, when God has come looking for the fruits that the vineyard would be bearing, right? Who wants to keep it for themselves? The leaders of the people. And they're misleading the people. They're not even necessarily doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. There's a whole other segment of this we can talk about from the perspective of the tenant farmers, like where if maybe it could very well be that the crops are underperforming. And so they think they're entitled to a larger share of things. That's a whole other kind of side excursus. But so over the years, God has sent the prophets to his people, right? To call them back, to call the leaders, sends prophets to the kings, sends prophets to the other priests, to call them back to faithfulness. Again, they're rejected. The prophets oftentimes are killed, right? So this happens time and time again. So then we get to this time, as Jesus is speaking, who does the Father send? The Son. The Son who has ownership. He has the title. He has the authority. to come and call back the people, to call the leaders, call everybody. Who's Jesus telling this parable to? Calling them again. And what are the leaders going to do? Kill him. Not just reject again. We're going to kill the Son. So what has Jesus done already several times in Mark's gospel? He's foretold his death at the hands of the leaders, the people who are entrusted with leading God's people. And so now we get to this point. He is telling this again. The leaders are going to kill him, and they're going to think about it this way. This is maybe a little bit reductive, but so if the vineyard is Jerusalem, where is Jesus when he is on the cross? He's outside of Jerusalem. He's outside of the sea. He's outside of the walls. This might be coming up again in the future here. Yeah, Bob. Okay. Mm-hmm. What, it's. I would say I would expand it even further from there. Is like this is a constant thing where those who are entrusted with leadership of God's people, if we're making the error of taking it upon ourselves or looking to ourselves as the ones who need to be receiving the praise and the benefits and everything, that's where it all gets twisted, right? It's the Son who has the authority. The Son who is the one who is to everything is due. And then Jesus kind of caps it off. He's like, all right, if you didn't get the parable there, let me tell you this. The one that the stone that the builders rejected is who? Jesus, the Son of Man, right? He's the one that's going to hold it all together because the Father makes him the capstone, the keystone that holds it all together, the cornerstone. And so the leaders of the people, they're seeking to arrest you. Oh man, I'm totally running out of time. We'll see how much ground we can cover here in the next 15 minutes. So again, like we've heard before, they wanted to arrest him, but they fear the crowds, so they leave. They got it. They understood the parable. And they don't like it. So what are they going to do about it? Well, let's see. Here's where the next segment of Mark's gospel moves us right along here. You could say Jesus now goes and he outwits three different groups of opposition. So like if you think about it, there was like a unified thing. Now there's going to be out of that unity, three different wings of it are going to come and try to trip him up. So let's see what happens. So first component of the potential opposition, you've got the Pharisees. The Pharisees and the Pharisees were probably the most well-liked of the groups of leaders. They were the group that was they were lay people, generally speaking. They were concerned with kind of living out God's instruction in life, and they were big advocates for okay, you've got these 613 law codes that they said God gave to Moses. This is how you're supposed to live as a good religious Jew. And then, so the Pharisees were well regarded because people looked at them. They were generally had it together from the outside and thought, okay, that's how you're supposed to be. And then the Herodians, all right, so Herodians are a party that is devoted to Herod, and by extension, who does Herod serve? Rome, Caesar. So if you think about it this way, you've got the people that are kind of the conservative nationalists and the people that are like supporters of Rome coming together to ask Jesus a question. Is there any right way Jesus can answer the question? From their perspective, they're coming at him with this thing. Okay, so there is this a Roman head tax that was required to be paid, and it was hated by the locals. Okay, so if Jesus is with this question that they bring to him, if Jesus says you have to pay the tax, he's supporting who? Rome. And you're going to alienate so many people that way. If you say no, you don't pay the tax, who are you alienating? Rome. And you're going to get rid of Jesus that way. So there's a no-win scenario here too. Okay, right? A charge of trying to drum up sedition or something like that is possible. So it's kind of they've arranged this perfect entrapment. So okay, so 12:13. So they, the leaders, right, those who just left, now later on are coming back. They're sending some of the Pharisees and some of the Herodians to trap Jesus in his talk. And they came and said to him, "Teacher, we know that you are true, that you do not care about anyone's opinion. For you are not swayed by appearances, but truly teach the way of God." Okay. Flattery much? Right? And when they're saying Jesus doesn't care about appearances, like he's not trying to make a show for anybody. He's not trying to sway anybody, to curry favor, things like that. Okay. So, preface executed. Question: is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay them or should we not? What do you think the expression on their faces might be? Some stifled smiles. It's like, answer this one, Jesus. Has Jesus answered questions like this before in the past? As people have tried to trip him up in the past and things like that? And what has Jesus done? Like the duplex slam wrestling move kind of thing, basically like the verbal wham. These folks haven't learned apparently. So okay, let's see what happens. So is it lawful? Is it not? But Jesus, knowing their hypocrisy, what's the hypocrisy? Well, they're being pleasant. This is kind of the flattery. It's empty flattery. That they can't decide on, right? That they have two different opinions on this, and they're not actually, they don't want to know the answer to the question. They just want to get rid of Jesus. Okay, so Jesus says, "Why put me to the test? Bring me a denarius and let me look at it." Now, denarius, okay, important thing. It is a coin. It is a Roman coin, and there's the image of the emperor on it, and with the inscription that belongs to the emperor. So the coin, if you think about it, the currency is the property of the emperor that he lets out to be used. Make sense? And the emperor also is one who is claiming divine authority, or even divine identity, right? So there's a claim of divinity on the part of the emperor. So you've got this stuff. So the image, so that which has the image, think about it this way: that thing which has the image of the authority is the property of the authority. Everybody with me so far? Okay. Yeah. So the divine Son, right? So on the coin. So all right. So there's this Roman coin. It's got this. All right. So Jesus says, "Bring me a denarius. Let me look at it." And then it says what? Then they went out to try to search and find one. Oh no, that's not what it says. Oh look, I got one here in my pocket. People who hate Rome carrying around the Roman currency. It's like, here, Jesus. So they bring him the Roman coin, Does Jesus answer? Holds up the coin. All right, so here's this coin, which you all know because you apparently have them, whose likeness, whose image is this, and whose inscription is this? And they said to him, Caesar's. Duh. Jesus says to them, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they marveled at him. Bless you. So the crowd that's around him, right? They don't think Caesar is God. They agree with Jesus on this. They know Caesar's not God. But what? So because the coin, right? Whose property is it? It's Caesar's property. It's Caesar's image. It's Caesar's inscription. Give it to Caesar. Give to God the things that are God's. What bears the image of God? People. Go back to Genesis. When God creates, he creates humanity in the image and likeness of God. And we lose the likeness. Likeness is corrupted. Right? You are God's. Do you think the Pharisees and the Herodians get this? Yes. And so they're amazed. They're like, oh, we just got owned. They know what Jesus did. They thought they had it all lined up. And they see it collapsing down around them magnificently. So Jesus has, okay, this is the first group. Yeah, Warren. Yeah. Because it goes back to, Warren's asking about like Jubilee years and things like that. Who has the authority to decree how the land is to be used, how people are supposed to be relating to each other within their territory? The owner of the vineyard. So it's the same kind of thing, is that God ultimately is the one in charge. It's not the owners. It's not the tenants. Not the tenant farmers, not the leaders, but God's ultimately in charge of everything. So kind of that's connection there. Yeah, or there'd be a new coin for the new emperor, and all that. They'd still have them in use, or they'd melt them down and reforge them or repress them, or because that's the thing with silver, and you can just repress it. But yeah, so Jesus kind of there's a lot more we can talk about from that, but kind of at the core of this first challenge that has been brought to him, how Jesus comes to that one. So now, okay, let's look at the second challenge that comes up. So the Pharisees and the Herodians, they came as the first group. Next group, the Sadducees. Sadducees were not all priests, but there tended to be more priests affiliated with the Sadducees. They were not as liked with the common people, with the regular folks. They're kind of viewed as a little bit more elitist, and kind of thought about more ways that they can kind of have things all be copacetic with Rome, or at least live in a more secular kind of thing. So if that makes sense. So the Sadducees also rejecting a lot of the stuff that the Pharisees would hold as, okay, there's all these law codes and everything like that. The Sadducees reject, yeah. And And most importantly, as Bob just said, they didn't believe in the resurrection, and that is why they are sad, you see. So the Sadducees, so this next group, again, important figures in the leadership of God's people. So the Sadducees, they now come to Jesus. He's like, oh, Pharisees blew it again. Sadducees will take care of it. So the Sadducees come to Jesus. The Sadducees, as it says right here, they say there is no resurrection. Mark is helping us remember that. So they ask Jesus a question, saying, Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies and he leaves a wife, but leaves no child, no seed, we can say that, no offspring, right? The man must take the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers. The first took a wife. When he died, he left no offspring. The second took her and died, leaving no offspring. The third likewise. And the 7 left no offspring. Last of all, the woman died. In the resurrection, when they rise again, whose wife will she be? For the 7 had her as wife. Interesting thing with the Levitical code there, and with everything kind of laid out, that just because the succeeding brothers would be charged with providing an heir through the widow, they didn't actually have to get married. It's like they could already be married. They were just charged with procreating, siring an offspring. So Sadducees disregarding that point, but okay. They kind of disregard the resurrection. And that seems to be kind of the bigger deal. So they get to that, and so they've kind of come to Jesus with this crazy hypothetical. It's like, all right, so teacher, you know things, you've got everything figured out. Tell us what's what. So all right, so now Jesus says to the Sadducees, is this not the reason you are wrong? Jesus is getting started early here. Because you know neither the scriptures nor the power of God. For when they rise from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. And as for the dead being raised, have you not read in the book of Moses, in the passage about the bush, how God spoke to him, saying, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living. You are quite wrong. Owned. Because they don't know what they're talking about. They're disregarding the scriptures. They've come up with this crazy thing. And Jesus says in the resurrection, it's not that people are going to be marrying, giving in marriage. That's not going to be the focus. He doesn't say there's not going to be male and female, importantly. But he says that in the resurrection, it is different. That is a different thing going on there. And as for the resurrection, the more important point, as opposed to this crazy thing you're talking about over here, God talks about resurrection. He also talks about a present tense thing. He's not God of the dead, but God of those who live. So that even those who died are not dead and gone. Because that's what the Sadducees would say: is when you're dead, your soul is gone with your body. There's no afterlife, let alone resurrection. There's no afterlife. That's it. Oh yeah, no, they don't care. That's the thing. They don't care. This is a complete. This is just stuff. They're like, well, you believe this. Tell us how this works out. They don't. They're not personally invested in this. They want to get rid of Jesus. But you're right. They're not contradicting themselves. They're just flat out, it's like somebody said facetious earlier, right? That's kind of all right. Oh, I'm out of time. All right. Actually, I'm past time. Oh, man. Bummer. Okay. Well, yeah, I'm sorry. We've only got halfway through here. We've got a lot more to cover for chapter 12, but we will pick this up. I should say Pastor Richard will pick this up next week. So thank you all.